And welcome back. Very good. Let's get started. So this is no longer your first online class. You know how this drill works. Let's go ahead and talk about money, banking, and bonds. Let me give you a reminder of what we've done so far in this semester. Not that you need it, but we had a break. So just to get up to speed, we began with measurement, how we think of quantities in the macro sense, that was GDP, national income accounting, how we think of prices, that was the CPI, and other price indices. We talked about inflation, deflation, and disinflation. We talked about the labor market. Then we moved to growth, the long-term trend of the economy. We haven't used that word yet, potential, the productive capacity. We studied that in the context of the Solow model. And then we turned to short-term GDP determination. And we built an expenditure model. In that model, we studied the GDP multiplier, the government spending and its effects on national income and whatnot in a Keynesian setting. And that was the simplest model we could think of, with no prices, nothing really interesting, but still a lot of insights to have. Then we turned to money, and we began to talk about the history of money, how it got started, how we got started with commodity money, how the commodity became standardized, how we produced change by clipping commodity money, standard units, and in conjunction with the monetary history, and it's the one and the same history, right? Monetary history gave rise to the banking history too. And so we talked about banks, why they exist, what they do, some pathologies. We talked about bank runs. We talked about multiple equilibria in banking. We talked about how banks produce various services, including risk pooling, including providing you with liquidity risk insurance in a deep sense. And we got to a point where we said, okay, banks are subject to runs. To prevent that and to help in the case of liquidity shortages, essentially as bankers associations, central banks were born. These were central reserve institutions that held liquid reserves to lend to banks in times of need. And then we said these central banks began to be the sole issuers of paper money. And for a long time, that paper money was backed by gold. That was with breaks until 1970s. But since then, we have been living in a period of fiat money. Money is valuable. Money is accepted as money only because, by convention, we treat it as such. Now, as of today, we'll begin to talk about monetary policy, although that phrase is not going to be in class today. To do so, we have to talk about the opportunity cost of money. If we aren't to use money, if people decide that, okay, I don't want to hold my savings as money, and remember that we can, right? Money is a store of value. The three things that define money are: money is, first and foremost, the medium of exchange, what people accept as payment. It's a unit of account. When you go somewhere and ask how much, right? People give you an answer. They don't ask how much in terms of what. We value things, we price things in terms of money, and it's a store of value. The money in your pocket actually represents your purchasing power, and it's your past earnings. So it is a store of value, but it's not the only store of value, right? Anything of value that you buy and hold is a store of value. And the question then becomes, okay, if I am not to use money for some reason as a store of value, what would I use? All right? Give it a thought for a second. Let me open these curtains and I'll be back. And I'm back. The answer, my friends, is a bond. Okay? We are able to think of all kinds of loans, interest-bearing instruments, as in terms of bonds. So let's first define the thing. A bond is and this is something you really have to know, it's a promise for a future payment. All right? So the bond is something like this. I'm going to say it's a piece of paper. It used to be correct, but including in Turkey, most countries no longer issue these papers. There's electronic entries. It says, here's 1,000 liras promised for, let's make this a one-year bond, all right? Oh, 2021, okay? Whose promise is this? Let's make it mine, all right? Refet holding. This piece of paper effectively says, whoever brings this piece to Refet holding, to the issuer, I am the issuer in this case, will get 1,000 liras in a year's time on this date, okay? Now, first the language. Türkçesine bulun. Bono fena değil ama aslında tahvil teknik olarak. Bono ve tahvil arasındaki fark vade farkı. Konuşuruz. A bond is a promise for a future payment. All right? So if you have this, you are entitled to get 1,000 liras from me on this date. The question is, why would I give this to you? Yeah, good. Interest isn't the right answer. No, but I need money, fine, right? In a monetary world, I need money. I would like to make the point that even if in our world, money did not exist, bonds still would. In the potato world, I can give you a piece of paper, assuming paper exists. I can give you a piece of paper that says, whoever brings this paper to me on this date will get 1,000 potatoes, and that will be my bond. All right? But yes, since we do transactions, since we do lending, borrowing with money, this is going to be because I need money. But notice that if I give this to you, right, here's my bond, I don't get any money in return, okay? The way these things are transacted is I sell it. I create this bond to sell it, all right? And that's my way of borrowing. So your answers are exactly correct. Why do I have this? Because I need money, because I need cash, because I need liquidity now, all right? And why do you want to give me money in return for this? Because it promises you money later, all right? So let's assume I issued this today and I'm selling it. I will auction it. Açık arttırmayla satacağım. Auction. I will auction this. Fine. I go out and say, okay, here's my bond. Can I see a price? Let's see. How much would you pay for this? All right. Mert Bey says 920. Arttıran yok mu? Aha. Fuat Bey says 900. Ooh. Okay. We have a winner. Somebody is paying 1,000 liras for this. Okay. Love you. Thank you. Now, let's have a conversation with you. Will you please write back whether you use your Ilgın name or Sena name? Very good. Sena Hanımcığım, here's a great question. This is something that we would have come to later, but let's do it now. Let's think of the opportunity cost from your side, okay? You have your money. you have 1,000 liras a penalty because you said you would pay 1,000 liras for this. Okay? If you didn't buy this for 1,000 liras, you still would have 1,000 liras. Is that right? Yes, very good. Now, if you had 1,000 liras, throughout the year, you could do whatever you want with your 1,000 liras. If you give it to me, you're going to have this for a year. And then only at the end of the year, you're going to get 1,000 liras. Okay? So you're telling me that having your 1,000 liras in your pocket throughout the year, being able to use it whenever you want if you need to, or, you know, not that you can go out now, but whatever. Yeah, the quarantine actually makes my teaching more difficult. So I'll stick to my guns and say, all right, fine, you know, having your 1,000 liras for a year, when you are able to go out, going out and having a party with 1,000 liras is the same thing for you as not having the 1,000 liras for a year and having it only at the end of the year. Is that correct? Ah, nice. Okay, so for those of you who haven't looking at the bond, Sena Hanım says that's why the bond should have an interest rate. The return should be more. Okay, so let's remember the definition of the bond and the difference between a bond and a standard bank loan. Okay, in a loan, you give me 1,000 liras today, specify an interest rate. So Sena Hanımcığım, at what interest would you lend me 1,000 liras for a year? %10%, says she. Okay. Now think about this. I already told you what I'm going to pay you at the end of the year. The bond pays 1,000 liras. Okay? If you want to receive interest, if you want to receive compensation for giving up your 1,000 liras now, at what price would you buy this bond today? Okay, let's try again. This is the key thing. You didn't know this, you're learning this now, okay? So give it a thought. What we are doing is thinking of the following exercise. Rather than asking you, give me this much today, okay? And I will give you more with this interest tomorrow, okay? I tell you from the beginning, I will give you this much tomorrow. How much will you give me today? Okay? So I ask you, how much is 1,000 liras a year from now worth for you today? How much would you pay for this bond? Give me a price. Okay, now she says 900. Okay? And now she understands. And I hope all of you, right? The way you receive interest with a bond is with this kind of a bond. This is a discount bond. You pay less than what you're going to receive in the future. The difference is what? The difference is 100 liras, correct. The difference is profit, also correct. In this case, that profit has a particular name. Time value is also correct, and it is the interest, okay? It's not the interest rate. It is the amount of interest, right? So we'll go with Sena Hanım's example. Let's say you paid 900 liras for this, okay? The price of bond is 900. And yes, congratulations to all of you. A lot of people said a lot of correct things here. It is about the opportunity cost. It is about the time money, right? It is a kind of profit, right? But the profit in lending borrowing agreements of this kind, we call it interest. That is what interest is, okay? Why does that entail a profit? Because of time value. And again, Sena Hanım did write, this is about desire for early gratification. It is exactly about that, okay? This is something economists take as granted. This is something we learn from the psychologists, Humans prefer happiness today to happiness in the future. In fact, you will recall that we had done this experiment in the class where I asked you, right, imagine a great happiness. Imagine the same happiness and feeling that today or feeling that 20 years from now. When would you like to feel that? And uniformly, you all said now. Okay? Now, when we translate this to an economist's terms, happiness is utility. Utility is from consumption, and therefore, marginal consumption being the same, you would much rather have the same marginal utility being the same. You would much rather have the same marginal utility today than in the future. Okay? But lending means you are postponing your consumption and transferring your right of consumption now to me. Does that come free? Okay? You all said, no, I would not give my right of consumption to you and postpone my own consumption, or I would not give the right to use my savings to you for free. It's a right that I will sell you. What is the price? Interest. How does interest arise here? Well, I tell you I will give you 1,000 liras in the future, and you tell me that the future 1,000 liras from you is worth 900 liras today. All right? The difference is interest, and that's 100 liras at this price. Okay? I will ask, okay, and I will wait to see a few okays. Good, okay. Any questions up to here? We just defined a bond, but it's a slightly counterintuitive. This is exactly how a bond works, okay? But since in your daily life you don't deal with bonds, you deal with normal loans, okay? It feels natural to think that we are specifying this and an interest rate, and the end payment is the free variable, okay? Here, we specify the end payment. That is what a bond is, okay? That payment is then priced. That price determines the interest rate. All right. Excellent question. Can bonds have negative profits? We'll come to this. Fidan Hanım, what is your question? Oh, I see. Okay, very good. We're all good? All right. Let's talk a little bit about bonds, all right? These things are called fixed income instruments. Türkçesi sabit getirili. Hatta genellikle bu sınıftaki şeyler sabit getirili menkul kıymet diye bilinir. Fixed income. Why do we call it fixed income? For the obvious reason that the end payment is fixed. I know the future cash flow. I know what I'm going to get in the future. I know what future income this thing promises. It's a fixed income instrument. Okay? Now, unfortunately, the fixed income class is broad. Not everything these days have this property, but we still call them fixed income. But bonds of this kind are truly fixed income. Okay? You are buying a fixed future income at a current price, right? Now, first let's think about the interest rate. What is the interest rate here? Okay, we have a wrong answer and a right answer. The 10% is the wrong answer for the following reason. The interest is something the lender earns, okay? How much did the lender spend to earn interest, Sena Hanım? 900. And how much is the lender earning as interest? That's right. You spent 900, and by spending 900, you earn 100 interest. What is the interest rate? Gentlemen and ladies, but in this case, this is a gentleman. This is class. which means if I'm picking on someone, you're going to let me pick on the person I'm picking on. All right, that question was for Sena Hanım, but Fuat Bey's answer is correct. It's about 11.1%. Okay, interest here is 100, and the interest rate is 100 divided by the price, right? Interest divided by the price times 100, which is about 11.1%. Okay, usually I would write this as, this is how you see interest quoted, okay, in percent. Are we good? Excellent. You're wonderful people. Now, here is something that initially feels confusing, puzzling, but is based on the definition of the bond, okay? The bond is always the same animal. This is the thing that pays 1,000 liras, right? Now, let's say Sena Hanım bought this for 900 liras, okay? And what do you know? 10 minutes later, she realized that she actually needs cash herself, and she doesn't have it because she gave her 900 liras to me, okay? This is a clear case of you having something of value, but not the liquidity you need, all right? Now, can you sell the bond before its maturity date? Very good, yes. There is a second hand is used more for clothing and things like that, okay? But yes, these are secondary markets, okay? Second-hand things are, or second-hand phrase is for things that are used and then sold. It's not like you're using a bond, right? But yes, in all primary markets, my apologies, in all financial markets, we have the language that the first time a security, okay, these are securities, a security is sold essentially by its initial issuer, we call that sale as taking place in the primary market. But then Sena Hanım has this bond, right? And it turns out I have 850 liras. I don't know what to do with this. I would much rather earn interest on it. I don't want it to lay idle, okay? And she is trying to borrow now, and something has happened. Let's say you learned that, I don't know, markets are going to close tomorrow, okay? So you all want to do your markets shopping today, right? You shouldn't all go out, but you get the idea. Now you need cash, okay? So how are you going to get the cash? Well, you may as well sell this bond. That kind of sales take place in the secondary market. Now the issuer, Refet, is no longer involved, right? It's other people buying and selling the claim on Refet's future 1,000 liras. Good? All right. It's not God, it's good, but fine. Does the price have to be 900 in the secondary market again? Of course not. Sure, right? In fact, if everybody is trying to sell their bonds and get cash in return, what will happen to the bond prices? That's right. Okay, so let's say the bond price falls to 800, right? Now, Sena Hanım is not happy because she clearly made a loss on this. On the other hand, it does happen, right? Here's the question. Let's have a volunteer. Who bought the bond for 800? Yeah, excellent. Yusuf Bey. No, Yusuf Bey beats you. Yusuf Bey buys a bond for 800, okay? How much interest is Yusuf Bey earning? The amount of interest. How much interest? Yeah. Okay. The interest is now 200, right? And the interest rate is 25%. So the interest and the interest rate went up. How was this possible? It's the same bond. No. Okay, yes, the market price has changed. Okay, now she lost is irrelevant. Okay, you don't even know at what price she had bought this, right? All you know is you paid 800 for this bond. Okay, we know, looking from the outside, that somebody had bought this for 900 and the interest rate was 11%. Somebody else bought this for 800 and the interest rate is 25%. Okay, but why? Right now, because of inflation, it can't be. We said nothing about inflation. Okay. And in fact, within the 10 minutes, inflation didn't change. No, these are not unreasonable things you're saying, inflation or this I'm not entirely sure of, but the answer is mechanical, okay? It comes from the definition of the bond, and I do want you to think about it. Why is it that the pattern is clear here, right? The less you pay for the bond itself, the more interest you're getting. Why is that? The answer is on the board. Yes, exactly, right? Now you get it. It's the fixed income. The future payment is always 1,000. So the less you pay for that future 1,000, the more interest income you're getting. Are we good? Let me say this again, and let me note that by the, before you get used to this line of thinking, you're going to make a lot of mistakes in this. All right, it's not trivial. Well, it is trivial, but you're not used to thinking in these lines. The fixed income security, the bond, promises you a unchanging future payment. Interest is determined by how much you are paying for that fixed future payment today. The less you pay for it, the higher the interest. Thus, this is something you have to know, bond prices and interest rates are inversely proportional. All right? So, for example, these days, when you look at what is happening in the world, because of fears about this, that, the other thing, everybody is selling everything. They are buying US dollars. But you don't just want to hold US dollars. You want to hold something that has a return. So people buy, what do people buy? Bonds is the right answer, okay? That's the secure instrument. You don't buy any bonds, right? You buy US dollar denominated bonds, and in particular in those, you buy the bonds that the US government issues. Those are the safe ones. And everybody wants safety these days. What happens to the price of those bonds? Of course, if everybody wants to buy the same bonds, the price of the bond increases. What happens to the interest rates on the US government bonds? That's exactly right, okay? So what we saw was about 2 months ago, the 10-year US Treasury rate, that's what it's called, okay, was something like, it was fluctuating between 1.5% and 2%, okay? It's now fluctuating between something like, it fell all the way down to 0.3%. And now, yesterday night, it was up to 0.8% or so, okay? Interest rates for US government bonds are much lower. On the other hand, think of the Turkish bonds, right? you know, the whole world is in turmoil. Turkey is already a badly governed, badly run country with a, you know, kind of shaky economy. Okay, do you think that Turkey will be able to pay in dollars, and Turkey borrows in dollars as well, right? So the Turkish treasury issues these with TL. It also issues these with dollars here. It promises future dollars. Are you now more afraid that the Turkish bond that is supposed to pay 5 years down the road may not pay? Somebody said yes, never. Why never? But anyhow, yes, right? The two things happen. One, the risk itself goes up, okay? And those of you who are economists, you're going to think of this a lot. You're very lucky. You're going to take a lot of 102 this semester from Burçin Hoca, and he is one of the world's foremost experts on these things. There is the risk itself, and there is the risk pricing, okay? How much do you fear the risk, all right? Both of these have gone up now. The world is riskier, and the same risk is priced more. We are more sensitive to risk, all right? So what happens? Do you want to hold those Turkish bonds? It is default risk, exactly, right? So people sell. What happens to the price of the Turkish bonds? They go down. What happens to the interest rates? Indeed, right? So as the US Treasury interest rates were falling, the Turkish Treasury dollar interest rates were in the order of 5.5% or so, okay? They are now at 8.5%. Do you understand why? But it also says, now notice that the primary issuer doesn't care about these at this point, right? I already sold my bonds at whatever price in the past. They are changing hands in the secondary market. I'm looking from afar and saying, you know, somebody who had bought my bond at an implied 5.5% interest is selling this now at an implied 8.5% interest rate, okay? My bonds are less valuable now. And maybe you're thinking, good thing I sold them in the past, okay? But do you care? This question doesn't have a correct answer, okay? It depends on who exactly you are. So somebody said no, and no is correct. If you don't think that you will have to deal with these markets again, this is all your past. You borrowed, you're doing whatever with your borrowing, you're going to pay or not pay, but let's assume you are the paying type, okay? You're going to pay in the future, and you know, people are buying and selling your bond between themselves. Why do you care, okay? On the other hand, what if you were thinking that on the maturity date, I will try to, the term is roll over this debt. Türkçe'de borcu döndürmek diye kullanılır. That is, rather than paying this back, I will borrow again. And with the new borrower, pay the old lenders. Yes, we can. Let's say we can think of two cases, okay? One case is where you borrowed once in a lifetime, okay? It's in your past. You will pay this $1,000 in the future. And you know, people are buying this between themselves for $999 or $1. You don't care. Whatever the price they buy themselves, in the end, you will pay 1,000 liras to someone. You have sold this in the past at some interest, at some price yourself, right? You received those funds, you have borrowed, and you will pay 1,000. Regardless of what the secondary market price is, you will pay the same 1,000, and you have received the same past price for this already. Are we good, Fidan? All right, very good. Now, in that case, you actually don't care, okay? It's just the secondary market people's problem, right? Somebody is selling this because somebody needs money now. Well, poor them, okay? We feel for them, but it doesn't affect us at all. On the other hand, perhaps I was thinking that I will borrow in the future as well. Perhaps I will need to issue bonds in the primary market again. Perhaps I am thinking that when the day comes on March 24th, 2021, I will sell another bond, and with what I get from that bond, pay this one off. Okay? That is called rolling over the borrowing. Türkçesi tekrar borcu döndürmek. And it's something very important. If I know that I will need to borrow again, do the prices in the secondary market tell me something? Do the prices in the secondary market give me information about the cost of borrowing for me in the primary market when I want to borrow? Right, now you're getting it, okay? So if I see that in the secondary market, my bonds are trading at prices that imply 8.5% interest, I know that if I go out today and want to borrow more, okay, I will borrow at 8.5% interest or more, because remember that it's the existing bonds that are trading at 8.5%. If I go out now and increase the supply of Turkish dollar-denominated bonds, the price will likely fall more. The interest rate will likely go up, okay? That means for the same future $1,000 promise, I will get less funds today. That means I will have to borrow more. Then the question becomes, if I borrow more, can I pay it back? Can I borrow more? Will the people lend me more? Okay, that is a very important question. Yeah. Do you understand the concern here, right? So for example, when we think along the lines of, well, okay, Turkey has a lot of dollar-denominated debt. This is factually correct, okay? It's correct for the government. About half of government bonds are either in dollars or in other foreign currency or indexed to foreign currency, whatever, okay? And Turkish firms have a lot of dollar-denominated debt as well, which my thinking is eventually the government will have to shoulder at least partly, okay? That means the government will have to make a lot of dollar payments. We don't have that kind of dollars. We will have to borrow those dollars. Can we borrow? Okay. Well, I look in the secondary market and I see that the Turkish dollar interest rates are going up. That's the market participants' way of saying your future promises aren't all that valuable. Okay. Here are some numbers for you. The same people who have the dollar funds, and some of these people are Turkish, many of them are all over the world, right, are saying, I'm happy to lend the US government at 10 years for an annual, interest rates are always reported in annualized terms, for an annual 0.7% interest. That's the price I'm going to give. In Germany, I'm happy to lend them at a minus 0.3% interest for 10 years. Okay, this is something that I would have thought impossible a decade ago. The same people are saying, not even at 10 years, if you want to borrow at 5 years to the Turkish government, I'm going to lend dollars, I'm going to buy your bonds. Bond is for German, the German borrowing instruments, the German bonds in the German word are known as bunds. Okay, the Turkish bonds, they are not very valuable. I'm not going to pay a high price for this. Since I will only fork out a small amount of money, the interest rate will be high. How high? 8.5%. Okay, so this is a lot about the perception of Turkey, the way it's run, the Turkish economy in international financial markets. All right, those things are very educative for us. But it also says, you know, look, if you need to borrow a shitload, either you'll have to pay a very high interest, which is going to make it unbearable, or more likely, if you come out and say, I really have to borrow, let's say, 15–20% of my GDP, right? It seems, even if you have to borrow a much lower amount, the amount we borrowed in the past, the interest rate was so high, when we go out and say we have to borrow a lot more, we probably wouldn't be able to do so. All right? And this is why, as macroeconomists, we are interested in these things. This is why we look at those secondary markets and we try to back out information from them. Are we kind of good here? Any questions? All right. I'm going to take that yes as yes, we're good, not yes, I have a question. All right, good. Birader, it's not the bonus, it's the bonds. All right. Let's talk about this now. Most of you are Turkish, and it's hardwired into you to think in terms of things related to inflation. All right. First, let's think in a world where there is no inflation. Would there still be bond prices different from what this is called face value, right? Or in a world with no inflation, would a bond that would pay you 1,000 in the future be worth 1,000 today? Right? Let's ask this to Hitch Pitch. He has been asking this question repeatedly. In a world with no inflation and no risk of inflation, let's say we're living in such a world that prices have never changed. We can't even imagine this, okay? The word inflation doesn't exist. Would the bond prices be equal to the face values? Yes, says Hitch Pitch. Now let's think of this. Beijing. I come to you and say, you seem to have 1,000 potatoes. Would you lend me those 1,000 potatoes for a year? Okay. This is something that involves no inflation, right? In the potato world, one potato today, one potato in the future, they're all one potatoes, right? No price change. But notice what is happening. I come to you and say, these are your potatoes. Can I use them for a year? Okay. And of course, when I'm using them, you can't do anything with them yourself. And I come to you and say, I will give you 1,000 potatoes at the end of the year. And I'm a very trustworthy borrower. I will certainly give you 1,000 potatoes at the end of the year. The only question is, are 1,000 potatoes at the end of the year the same thing for you as having those potatoes for a year now? What do you think, Paige? The answer is now, no. Well, if the 1,000 potatoes at the end of the year are the same thing for you at the beginning of the year, okay? If I tell you that in the world with no inflation, I will give you 1,000 liras at the end of the year, would you give me 1,000 liras today? Yeah. It's the same thing as potatoes now, right? If there is no inflation, rather than saying potatoes, I can give you monetary values too. In the world with no inflation, okay, if I tell you that at the end of the year, I will give you 1,000 liras, and the purchasing power of the 1,000 liras at the end of the year is the same as the purchasing power of the 1,000 liras today, okay? Will you give up 1,000 liras worth of purchasing power for the year just to get the same 1,000 liras of purchasing power at the end of the year? Is 1,000 liras at the end of the year, if you know there is going to be no inflation, the same thing as having 1,000 liras today? No, you wouldn't. Okay. Would you pay more or less for the promise of 1,000 liras at the end of the year? Would you pay more today or less today? You would pay less. You would ask for interest. Okay? Thus, interest is not only about inflation. Okay? You told me that in a world with no inflation risk, no concept of inflation, there would still be interest. Indeed, because this is humans prefer current consumption to future consumption, current happiness to future happiness. Okay? Whenever I ask you to do transactions over time, you think that, wait, you're transferring things from current me to future me. I like the future me. I value the future me. How do I know this? Because savings exist, right? And the only reason we save is we're going to transfer resources to future ourselves. Thus, from the fact that people do save, we understand that they value their future selves. However, we don't value our future selves as much as we value our current selves. When I asked you, would you rather be happy now or 20 years down the road, you all said now. You didn't say, or we're indifferent. It's both us. Okay? Therefore, it's not only about inflation. Whenever we think of, this is a nice word for you to know, intertemporal decisions, time value becomes an issue. Intertemporal. Temporal means related to time. You hear this a lot in science fiction movies, Star Trek, whatever. Okay? You know, there is a temporal rift. That means these guys are going to travel in time now. Intertemporal means across time periods. All right? A loan is, by definition, intertemporal. You lend now, you're paid back later. There has to be a now and later. Okay? And whenever we're thinking of intertemporal, we're thinking of our current selves versus our future selves. Therefore, the moment you said, I'd much rather have the same happiness today than in the future, you said, if you're taking things from current me and giving things to future me, okay, since future me is less valuable for me now, okay, to convince the current me to lend to you, you have to promise more payments in the future. All right? Are we good with this? Thank you. Thank you. Oh, nice. It is surprising somewhat that the class is kind of interactive, isn't it? I actually did not expect this. Yes. All right. Let me ask you, just for chat and to give you a mild break. How is this online learning, distance education thing going? Yeah. It must be clear to you that the university isn't just about going to classes, doing homework, whatever, right? It seems that a lot of what we do, we can do. In fact, a lot of what we do in class, we can do this way. But I would hate to have to do this forever this way. Yeah, true that. True that. For our class is lucky this way. Some other classes have to be more difficult. Yeah. But you're losing out a lot on the socialization. You're losing out a lot on being able to turn to the next person next to you and say, what the hell was that? Right? You're losing a lot on learning from each other. That's the big problem. I'll tell you that the professors do put a lot of effort, and the university administration actually did an admirable job. I mean, doing this stars integration, getting the Zoom licenses, whatever, within a few days. Incredible. Labs of the Econ. So that's going to work very well, actually, because one, your TAs are very good. We're lucky that way. Two, what's going to happen is small classes. So you're going to see the grid view. You will see each other. You will all be able to talk, right? So we do department meetings on Zoom now. And the department meeting is somewhere between 20 to 25 people. You know, people are politely muting themselves, unmuting, and then somebody forgets to mute again. So that person gets reminded, whatever, but it works very well, right? through that too. And so in your lab hours, oftentimes your TA will be sharing her or his screen with you, right? You will be connecting to maybe the TÜİK web page or the central bank's web page and talk about monetary policy, look at the same document, have a conversation. I think that's going to work particularly well. It's more difficult here because currently we have about 70 people here, right? So it's impossible for us to see each other properly, for you to just chime in and talk. So we have to do this through chat. But even this is working out. So I think that's very good. All right. And by the way, some genius at the university thought of opening up these Zoom accounts for the classrooms rather than the professors, which is what saved all our asses. I will ask to learn who thought of this and buy the guy or gal a bunch of chocolate flowers, whatever. It's just freaking ingenious. Very well done. All right. You are worried about midterms. Well, you should be. You have to be studying more. That is true. That is true. But good that you should be worried. Now, we'll find a way, okay? That's the part we haven't figured out yet. That's the part we haven't really begun to think about yet. The first priority was making sure that your studentship is ongoing. You are remaining in the intellectual community. That's what the university is about, okay? Exams are the byproduct of having to grade you and give you credit, give you a diploma, whatever, right? The aim is to keep you as students, to keep your curiosity somewhat satisfied, all right? So that is working out. We'll find a way of doing the exams. Surely we'll find a way of doing the exams. Don't worry about it. If you have ideas, you're more than welcome to send an email and suggest, why don't you do the things this way, all right? At the department meeting, we decided that we're going to give the university a little time. If they come to us and say, here is how exams are going to take place, we'll say, fine. If they come to us and say, this is how we suggest you do things, but you're on your own, that's fine. If they come and say, every class is sufficiently different, find your own ways of doing exams, we'll find our own ways, all right? And we'll let you know, but don't worry about it, okay? Wait, I missed something. Give me a second. Sananam, we should be studying more. Yes, you should be studying more, okay? If you have to ask, you should be studying more. All right. How is that possible? If that's, I entered to a class yesterday and there was something else going on, happens again, let me know, all right? Yeah, true that. Yeah, I know. It's difficult sitting in your couch in your pajamas and remembering that you're a student, you have to be taking notes, whatever. We're all getting used to this, right? It's not easy for many of us here either. Imagine the professors with small kids. It's not easy at all. Okay, shall we go back to class? All right, good. Now, what you learn and what you have to remind yourself is a bond price and interest rate are inversely proportional because these are fixed income instruments, because the future payment is fixed and you are determining the interest by choosing the price you're paying for the same future payment period. Okay? The less you pay for the same future payment, the more interest, the higher interest rate you're getting. Now, the question that you have been asking throughout, though, is still valid. There is interest. How does that factor in? All right? Fine. We're going to talk about this in two ways. And since you asked this question so insistently, let's tackle the interest question first, right? let's say Sena Hanım bought the bond at 10% interest today. She paid, or 11% interest today. Okay, she paid 900 liras, right? Then your government announced a set of policies which made you understand that they really don't know what they are doing. Okay, and inflation is going to go up to 15% this year. All right, could this happen? It could. Surely not in Turkey, but hypothetically, it is possible. Okay? Now, Sena Hanım is going to sell this bond. Okay? And you all know that inflation will be at least 15%. Okay? So somebody is going to buy the bond. At what price would you buy it now? Oh, okay. So Atif Bey is buying the bond for 750 liras. Sena Hanım, of course, is deeply upset, right? But she understands too. She understands that the future 1,000 liras are now worth really much less because it represents a lower purchasing power. It represents lower consumption in the future, okay? So grudgingly, she sells this for 750, okay? What is the interest rate now? Is 33%, okay? The interest rate tripled. It went up. Observe the causality. And this is something that you really have to know to pass this class. Causality runs from higher expected inflation to higher interest rates. Your fear of higher inflation led you to value any future nominal payment, any future money, less, and therefore you're going to pay less for any future monetary promises. Any bond is now worth less because it's going to pay you money in the future, and future money is not going to buy as much goods and services. Thus, higher inflation leads to higher interest rates. Did you understand? Okay, let's do this again. A lot of lessons and some, why don't you do this again? I want you to think for yourselves, okay? Economics is in a great deal self-study, right? How would you behave? What do you do, right? It's a lot of introspection. Here are two countries, okay? Both are selling you bonds. Both promise you 1,000 of their money, okay? And in both, you happen to have their money already, okay? You're gonna lend them in their money, which you already have, right? And then at the end of the year, when these bonds pay back, you're gonna buy their goods and services with that payment. Are we good? That's the thought experiment we're doing. Okay. Now, in country one, you expect 2% inflation. Okay. You expect 2% inflation. That means everything in country one will get more expensive by an average of 2%. You know that inflation is a weighted average, whatnot. Okay. In country two, you expect things to get more expensive by an average of 10%. You expect 10% inflation, okay? All right. Both countries sell you bonds that are going to give you 1,000 of their money at the end of the year, okay? Let's say in country one, you bought the bond for 950, okay? So that's something like what? A bit more than 5% interest, all right? If this is your time preference, in country 2, at what price would you buy the bond? You all have your own prices, right? So say a few. How much would you pay? Any others? These people are auctioning their bonds too, right? Somebody said 850. Somebody else said 850. Somebody said 900. Okay? Any more? Would anyone pay more than 950? Right, because in the 2% inflation country, if you ask for 5% interest, right? In the 10% inflation country, surely you're not going to ask for anything less. And in fact, you're going to ask for more. In fact, every one of you asked for more. Why? Because inflation is eroding the value of money over time. Therefore, whenever you are told, lend now, be paid back in the future, you say, wait, future lira isn't the same as current lira. Not only because I value today, but because prices are going up. And the future lira is going to buy less anyway. So you will have to compensate me for it. Therefore, as your expected inflation went up, you began to ask for a higher compensation. That is, you began to say, I will pay less for the same future payment. Bond prices will fall, interest rates will go up. Okay? You can look at the trend value, you can have your own inflation forecast, you can think of inflation risk, the variance of this, right? This is why you're going to take a statistics class, okay? But yes, whenever I'm told blah, blah, blah, a year from now, the first thing I think of is, what will the world look like a year from now? Whenever I'm told blah, blah, 1,000 liras a year from now, the first thing I think is, what can I buy with 1,000 liras a year from now? And then I ask, will I want those things a year from now, or will I want those things now? Okay? All right. This is really, truly, deeply very important because there is an inane, I'm not going to say discussion, but an insistent line coming from the palace that the causality runs from interest rates to inflation. Okay? That is, high interest rates cause high inflation. You do understand the mechanics of this now. Okay? Of course, we see high interest rates and high inflation together. Okay? The correlation is apparent everywhere. But you understand that the causality goes from high inflation to high interest rates. Okay? This is 102. This is something you have to know. Are we good? Notice that this is not my political persuasion, you know, my understanding, whatever, right? This is basic bond math. And you understand that an interest rate is compensation for an essentially intertemporal trade. You're going to give up your money now, you're going to get money in the future. If inflation is high, money is losing its value over time. Therefore, you're going to ask for more money, higher interest, period. Oy, Yusuf, you're killing me. If the causality is going from inflation to interest rates, okay? That means high inflation will lead to high interest rates, low inflation will lead to low interest rates, okay? We haven't yet talked about if I change interest rates exogenously, okay? What happens to inflation? We're gonna get there, but for that, we'll have to talk about central banking, all right? Yeah, inversely related is correct. And in fact, you're gonna see that to lower inflation, you will have to increase interest rates, okay? But we're not there yet. Now, but please understand, when asked, why is the average interest rate in Turkey in the order of 12, 13, 14% today, okay? These numbers are correct, whereas they are, 0, 1, 2 in the US, even for private people, even for, households and firms. The answer is the US has 1.5% inflation. Turkey has 12.5% inflation. Is that obvious? Could I see responses from a couple more people who don't always chime in? We have about 70 people, okay? Yusuf, fine. Okay, what you now wrote is more correct, but we haven't made that argument either, okay? We haven't talked about how inflation responds to interest rates yet, okay? We're not there. But could I have, yes, I'm here, I'm awake from the rest of the class a little bit? All right, very good. There was a question about interest rates. Let's do central banking and policy first, then talk about that, okay? You don't know the economics to have this discussion yet. Cool. All right, but now we understand that in a world with inflation, two separate things are going on, right? One is values are changing because of inflation. Two is I do want higher purchasing power tomorrow to give up the same purchasing power today, right? So we define two kinds of interest rates. Let's get rid of this now. Wait, before we do that, let's talk about the following. How expensive can this bond be? Let's say there is no inflation, okay? And let's say this bond is in high demand for whatever reason, right? I'm a extremely reliable borrower in a very uncertain world. You have no doubt whatsoever that I will pay you back. You really want to get rid of your money somehow. And inflation hasn't been invented, okay? How much would you pay for this bond? I'm asking you a personal question, right? How much would you pay for this bond? So somebody said, okay, so somebody said 900, okay? Why 900? Why not 999, for example? This is tricky, okay? I already told you that Germany has negative interest rates, but I first want you to understand how abnormal that is, right? Because in general, observe the following. Many of you said at most 1,000, below 1,000, whatever. Right, this is the way we normally think. For the following reason, let's say, briefly, I think, maybe I'm gonna pay 1,001 liras for this bond, okay? In fact, let me have a volunteer for this one, for this experiment. Mert Bey, you're the volunteer, very good. Let's say you thought of paying 1,001 liras for this, okay? All right. Now, here's the question. If you pay 1,001 liras for this today, how much money will you have at the end of the year? 1,000, okay? What are you giving up for this now? What are you giving up for this now? This is not a yes/no question. What are you giving up? What are you paying for this now? 1001. Yes. Then again, Sena Hanım, you shut up. Okay? This is between Mert Bey and me. Okay, right? Very good. Now, here is the question. Think of the opportunity cost. Okay? Think of the alternative. If you hadn't bought this bond, let's say you wouldn't have anything to buy, so that you sat on your money. Okay? You just kept it in your pocket. If you did that, did not buy the bond, how much money would you have at the end of the year? 1001. Which one is better? 1001. Very good math. Okay. Now comes the great question. What if there is deflation? What if prices are going down? What if everything is getting cheaper? Then would you buy this bond that is going to pay you 1,000 liras after a year for 1,001 liras? This is an open question. This time it's for everyone. Okay, so now let's talk with Fulya Hanım. Okay, many of you said no, a few said yes. Fulya Hanımcığım, are you there? Of course, I know you're there, but very good. Let me ask you this. Prices are going down, okay? So at the end of the year, everything will be cheaper. Here is what you're choosing between. Either you have 1,001 liras now, right? You could buy this for 1,001 lira, okay? So either you will buy this for 1,001 liras. At the end of the year, prices will be lower, right? At those lower prices, you will have 1,000 liras to buy things with, right? Or you will not buy this. You will keep your 1,001 liras in your pocket. At the end of the year, at the same lower prices, you will have 1,001 liras to buy things with, right? Which one is better? Isn't it? You would rather have 1,001 liras. Regardless of there is inflation, deflation, we know this, we fear this, whatever, right? More future money is always more than less future money. If you have 1,001 liras, right? You ask yourself, if I don't buy this bond, which pays 1,000 liras in the future, how much money will I have in the future? I will have whatever I have now. Will I ever pay to get less in the future? What do you think, Fulya? No. Now you get it, right? This is fine. Now you get it, right? Here is the good way of thinking about this. Money itself, you can think of this as a kind of bond, if you want to, in the sense that it has future value, right? Tomorrow it is money too. What interest does money itself carry? What is the return on just holding on to money? What is the return? Money has a value, true. But in nominal terms, so inflation isn't in there, okay? If you have 100 liras today and you go to bed, wake up, how much money will you have tomorrow? Yeah, you're going to have 100 liras again. So how much interest does money have? That's right, none. Money carries an interest of 0. This is important for the following reason. Since money itself has an interest of 0, would you ever consent to a, sorry, computer acting up. There we go. Would you ever consent to a negative interest rate loan? Right? Because I tell you, what if effectively, negative interest is this. Give me 100 liras now, and I will give you 90 liras in the future, okay? And you would immediately think, well, how about not giving you 100 liras now, keeping 100 liras, and having 100 liras in the future? Isn't that better? Duh. All right? Therefore, we used to think that the interest rate can fall all the way down to zero, but not further, okay? This is known as the zero lower bound. Interest rates can be lowered to zero, but not further, okay? Yes, exactly. Mehmet Bey is completely correct, right? And we'll talk about that on Thursday. But to talk about that, we'll first talk about two kinds of interest rates, or two ways of thinking about interest rates. One is the nominal interest rate, okay? That is, I paid this much money for this bond, I get that much money afterwards, and the interest rate is this much in money terms, okay? You know this use of nominal. That's the nominal interest rate, all right? But a related concept is I am giving up purchasing power now for future purchasing power. What is happening there, okay? Because some of this transaction, since we are doing this over time, prices will also change. And therefore, I will have to think about inflation changing the purchasing powers. Without inflation, what is happening to my purchasing power, okay? That question is the real interest rate question, okay? So usually we have the interest rate, nominal interest rate, we denote it by I. We have the real interest rate, which we denote by R, okay? And we have inflation, which we denote by pi. All right? And the relationship, the exact relationship is this. These are in percentages. That is, this is a number like 0.1. I look at this and say, oh, 10% interest. Okay? This is a number like 0.3. Okay? And I look at that and say, shit, 30% inflation. Okay? And therefore, the total return I get is 1 plus I, right? I get my principal on opera back and the interest. For small I, R, and pi, you can do a Taylor series approximation to this. That is, linearize this relationship. And you would then get the nominal interest rate is about equal to the real interest rate plus inflation. Okay? This is known as the Fisher identity. And the important thing here is to understand that this is a definition. It's not a theory. It's not a causal relationship. Okay? It just says if the interest rate you are getting, the nominal interest, is 5% and inflation was 3%, then your purchasing power increased by 2%. Therefore, the real interest you get was 2%. Is that good? Cool. Now, we can think of this in two ways. One is when we are doing the lending and borrowing, okay? When we are entering into this agreement, I am buying your bond, right? Remember that Sena Hanım bought my bond for 900 liras, okay? So she was thinking inflation would be 8%, right? She lent to me at 11%, thinking inflation would be 8%, expecting a 3% real interest rate, okay? Is the math adding up for you? I would like to see a few more. Yes, good, very good. Okay. Now, do you know that you're going to get 3% interest here? Are you sure that it's going to be 3%? You don't, right? Because you expect inflation to be 8%, but we screw up macroeconomic policy. We screw up the central bank. Inflation goes up to 12%. Okay. At the end of the year, you look back. What is the real interest you got? Yeah, it is -1, right? You get -1% real interest rate. This terminology is therefore important for us. Are we asking this question before the event being inflation being realized, okay, or after the event? These are called ex ante, before the event, or ex post, okay? Those of you who take in philosophy, you know that this is actually properly called ex post factum, after the fact, okay? What is the fact? Realization of inflation. This is the thing we didn't know, right? Because the moment you bought the bond, the moment you knew the price, you know the nominal interest. You don't know the real interest because you don't know inflation. Inflation hasn't been realized yet. Ex ante, you have expected inflation and expected real rate. Ex post, you have realized inflation and you know what happened to your purchasing power. All right? Are we good? We are now concluding this lecture. Any final questions here? We're going to start from here and we're going to repeat this ex ante, ex post real nominal interest rate discussion. Okay? So we're going to take it from there on Thursday. Any questions? Thank you. You're very kind. Okay. Love you all. It is great. We're lucky that we were able to do class for half of the semester. So I know you people and I feel close to you. And oddly, I did enjoy this and I felt like we were doing something together, even though we are all over the world. So thank you very much. Keep safe, be at home, and remember that your studies are continuing. So make sure that you go over your notes, look at your lecture notes, think about the world. You're going to get homework, work on that, whatnot. If you have questions, we'll be in touch. Be well, take care, live long and prosper.